podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Some of the topics are addiction, fear, faith, self-compassion, relationships, codependency, emotional intelligence, and more. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations. Water is not the simple glass of liquid we are taught in school, the random arrangement of hydrogen and oxygen called bulk water by scientists. Rather, water has the amazing ability to arrange its hydrogen and oxygen molecules into repeating geometric formations, just like a crystal. This is called structured water. Why does structured water matter? In this episode, Nevin Eckert and Dr. Colleen Uday explore the science of structured water and how it is different from bulk water. Since 99% of our molecules by count are structured water, it becomes vitally important to our health. By looking into how the water in our body affects our DNA, proteins and enzymes, and also cellular communication, it really becomes apparent that the water we drink must be carefully examined. Does water affect our consciousness, our thoughts, perceptions, and judgments? What is the relationship between water and spirituality? This statement has been paraphrased based on the information found on watercodes.com. Dr. Colleen Uday is a water researcher whose primary work focuses on the science of structured water. She's the author of Water Codes, The Science of Health, Consciousness, and Enlightenment, which examines the dynamic physics of water, its role in the body, and our spiritual relationship with water throughout ancient times. Nevin Eckert has been researching holistic health, water quality, and emerging water technologies for 23 years. His mission is to invoke higher levels of water consciousness to people around the world, inspiring them to obtain autonomy for their personal health. His philosophy is based in the understanding that when water is in its purest form and at its highest quality, it is a living substance. Nevin has created a custom drinking water system solution configured with the state-of-the-art components to purify and transform any water into the highest quality drinking water, creating a medicinal spring water quality with therapeutic properties. Here is the interview with Nevin Eckert and Dr. Colleen Uday. In your own words, who is Nevin Eckert and Colleen Uday?
I am a researcher of nature and water and a health nut.
Good. Good for us.
Just a real health geek and someone who believes that our body, spirit, soul has a far greater potential of health and vitality than what most people think.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Carly.
And I would describe myself as a student of life. I love to learn about my world and myself. And I'm very passionate about the world of spirituality and science and bringing those two things together for a more holistic approach to life in general.
Wonderful. Thank you. My first question to both of you, or one of you can answer this specific question. What is your non-scientific definition of water?
My non-scientific definition of water would be hard to go non-scientific here, but for me, water is the driving force of life. It is the bridge between the energetic world and the physical world for manifesting energy and spirituality into physical matter.
Interesting. Nevin, do you want to add?
Goodness. Water is consciousness. It's also how consciousness travels, I believe, is in water. There's water everywhere. It's one of the most predominant elements in our world. So water conducts consciousness.
Do you think that water comes before air?
I don't know about that. I don't know everything, so I'm careful to...
What do you think, Carly?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously these are two things that we need to stay alive. But water for me is really the foundation for life. So when we say, looking for life on other planets, what we're looking for is not necessarily an atmosphere of oxygen. What we're looking for is water. And when we find water, we assume that there may be life present. So for me, water does come before air. And I really do see it as the connecting force in that mind, body, spirit connection. We have that biology of belief and the connection between our mental, physical, and spiritual self. And for me, water is that connecting force that allows those things to work together.
Right. What is it that most of us don't know about water?
Well, most people don't realize water as being a living substance. They just see it as H2O and only look at it in terms of its physical quality. It also has an energetic quality, and water is very much like a cassette tape or a CD. It holds and stores information. So I would say that's what one thing that most people don't consider about water.
Right.
I agree with that. I think that we're all aware that water is primarily responsible for life, but I don't think people necessarily realize that it's also the most vital piece of our health. I think also people don't realize just how much of their body is made of water. If we count all the molecules in our body, over 99% of them are water. It's simply, when we look at it by weight, because the molecules are so small, by weight, we're about between 75 to 90%, depending on what stage of life you're in. But by count, it's over 99% of our molecules are water in our body. I think that's something that people don't necessarily know. And then, of course, from my perspective, there's also two different types of water, and those water exist on a spectrum. So we have bulk water, which is just kind of that random hydrogen and oxygen in a glass. And then we have what's called structured water, which is where those molecules of hydrogen and oxygen are arranged in repeating patterns. And it's that kind of water that really sustains and promotes life, whereas the bulk water does not. So that's something that most people don't know. We look at a glass of water and assume, well, it's just water. They all look the same, so it all is the same. And that's simply not true.
Right. How does water affect the mind, and how does the mind affect water?
That is a wonderful question. So
good.
Water, simply a 1% change in our hydration level has massive impacts on how our mind works, our cognitive function, our ability to solve problems or think critically, have good decision making, a sense of well-being and that positive mental health state. Water drastically affects that. So how hydrated our cells are has an immeasurable impact on the ability of our brain to think. Now, our brain sits in a bath of water. So does our spine. So it's surrounded and bathing in cerebrospinal fluid, which is primarily water. And when we change our level of hydration, it can actually cause our brain to shrink. Our brain, upon waking, is actually smaller than it was when we went to bed the night before because we have not drank all night long while we're respiring. And so we're breathing out water vapor and we're becoming slightly dehydrated while we sleep. And we can actually measure that in the size of our brain when we wake up. So how water affects the mind is very, very strong. And then conversely, the mind has a wonderful, impressive impact on water. Water itself is very responsive. So I mentioned earlier that structured water is when water has its hydrogen and oxygen arranged in those repeating patterns. And those patterns have an effect on the quality and the properties of that water. So what we find is that those patterns are capable of change depending on what the water is exposed to. Those patterns will change in response. It's incredibly responsive. And one of the things that it is very responsive to is consciousness. So you see that in different photographic researchers such as Masaru Emoto, Theodore Schwank, Laurent Costa. These there's several different people really that have done this kind of work where they have exposed water to different thoughts, different types of consciousness, different ideas, and as a result, see the different patterns that water creates in response. So those two, the mind and water, work together extremely well in sort of a biofood feedback loop, where one affects the other and the other affects the one.
It makes so much sense to me from the point of view that everything's connected, so everything affects everything else. Nevin, do you want to expand on that thought?
Sure. Carly did a great job of explaining that. Really, for me, it's like an even bigger conversation. So, our thoughts have such a great influence on the health and well-being of our entire body, and even our intuitive self and messages that we're sending to other people, even how well we are hydrated affects how well those thoughts, those frequencies, those vibrations of energy that are behind or emanating from those thoughts are able to be transmitted to others or to ourselves. So I think, the question that you have is really, for me, how well are we hydrated and how well is the body able to conduct its subtle energies of thought and feelings, not just thought, but also, our emotional body influences or conducts energy the same way as thoughts are conducted.
Right. So I want to talk to you a lot more about cellular hydration and hydration in general. But before that, I want to ask you a question, Nevin. How did you decide to study water quality, and what is quality water?
I just had a real passion for health and vitality. And as a young man and a boy, growing old and getting sick and having diseases just didn't make sense to me. I just was like, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And I just never, as a very young man, I just intuitively, the thought of growing old or getting disease just didn't make any sense to me. And then that started happening, to loved ones and myself.
Right.
And I went through a little bit of a healing crisis, and it wasn't really a decision. There wasn't any deciding. It was something that had to be, in order to confirm or to support those early feelings as I had as a young man of not believing in growing old and being diseased. Of course, I had to study water.
Great. Yeah, that's a great reason, right, to begin on that path. So what is quality water?
Quality water is a water that facilitates our body's inherent potential of health and wellness. So that's really, I mentioned that earlier, the average person and our health institutions, doctors, all of that, I feel really comes from a place of under acknowledging and overlooking how important a role the quality of water that we drink on a daily basis plays in our overall health and longevity.
Right. And that triggers me to ask both of you a question. Do you have a water healing story, personal story?
Yes, absolutely. And I know Nevin does too. I went to school when I began my college studies. I developed my own major in natural alternative medicine. I had a close family friend of mine my son's grandmother actually, who had gone through a very, very rare form of cancer. She was one of 2 people in the United States that had this specific type of cancer. And as such, she became a bit of a guinea pig for the allopathic medicine approach. At the same time that she was doing allopathy, she was also doing some natural treatment options, vitamin C injections, qigong, herbalism, those types of things. And those were having a marked effect on her cancer. So that's the direction that I decided to go in school. And originally I was looking at going pre-med. Having seen her experience with allopathy, I decided that was not a system that I wanted to be a part of, but that I was very interested in the natural side of things that she had been investigating. Fast forward some years, and I experienced a pretty severe carbon monoxide poisoning. So my blood toxicity was very high. It took me many months to recover. And when I finally had reached kind of the peak of what I could do myself with the tools in my toolbox of herbs and nutritional supplements, and I had so many tools in my toolbox to use to help myself recover. But I hit a peak and I hit a plateau, and I was not able to fully recover back to the level of health that I had experienced before my poisoning. It was a direct result of not being able to treat myself, not being able to recover all the way, that I began to look into other things. And that work, that research led me to structured water, which completely changed my life. So when I began treating my body and my health in terms of trying to improve my body structure and trying to reduce my exposure to things that would destructure my energy and my water, my health really began to turn around for the better. And I never went back.
You mentioned improving body structure. What does it mean?
So the water in our body, those 99% of our molecules are highly structured. And what we find in science, that when there's a pathology in the body, when there's some kind of a disease, it's can be traced back to a loss of structure in our water. So the water in our cells that maintains our cellular integrity, the water that surrounds our DNA, the water that helps conduct electromagnetic information in our body, the water that all of our enzymatic processes has to go through. Everything in the body happens in, through, and because of this highly structured water. So what we find is that when we start to lose that structure, when the water in our cells becomes more like that bulk water that I mentioned, just kind of a random arrangement of hydrogen and oxygen, pathology begins to start, and we experience disease and ill health as a result. So I began really taking the approach of trying to do things that would increase the structure of the water inside of my body, which had to do with diet. It had to do with my own consciousness, meditation, yoga practices, and drinking a highly quality water. At that time, I also was working with some crystals and pendants that worked on a similar principle.
Right. To improve the body structure, we need more than water, from what I understand.
We do. And
diet.
All of those things. Again, it goes back to just how responsive water is. So water is so responsive. And we simply cannot look at our bodies any other way and really have an effective approach. We have to understand that, and since our bodies are primarily made of water, they're also very responsive to information. Information we may not be consciously aware, but we're surrounded by all the time. So, people find that when they experience things like EMF sensitivities or difficulties living with smart meters and those types of things, it's because that energy really is affecting us and the water inside of our body, and therefore, how well our cells work, or how good our cognition is, how much our hydration levels are. All those things begin to play off each other and become affected.
It makes a lot of sense. Nevin,
yes.
Do you have a water healing story for us?
I do actually. It all happened for me in late 1994, and I was essentially going through burnout from life. I was just extremely exhausted, had been burning the candles at both ends, and putting myself emotionally and physically and psychologically just through rigors for many years. And I just kind of crashed and started. I think I was 24 at the time, and I just felt like I was 90 years old. And one of the things that I noticed was my vision started degrading. And I actually had my eyes checked, and the optician made a prescription for me. And at the same time, I got my very first water energizing device from Austria. So my healing process started, and I started energizing or structuring my drinking water, all of it. And after about 10 months, I was feeling better. The achiness and the feeling like an old man went away. And I actually went back and had my eyes checked again, and my vision had significantly improved.
Wow. Yeah, it just makes so much sense to me, everything both of you are saying. So water can be restructured, right? And like you said, Nevin, now you can actually have the water, tap water into going through a system, and the system will restructure and re-energize the water, or energize the water.
Yeah, you're leaving out an important piece. Carly and I are, very careful not to advocate not physically purifying our water first. So it's very important that you're not just drinking tap water.
Right.
You're first purifying your water physically, and then transforming and enhancing it into a mature or a ripe water, or what we refer to as a true spring quality of water. And yes, one of the processes is an energizing or a structuring of the water.
Cool. What is the connection between aging and dehydration?
I can start with this one. So, there's still a lot of debate in the scientific community as far as, what the true cause of aging is. We know that we have the fraying of our ends of our telomeres. So the telomeres are the kind of strands on the ends of our DNA. And over time, after each replication, those ends begin to fray. It's often given the metaphor of being like a shoelace that loses its end cap and it begins to fray. So there's still debate about what causes that fraying or how to best intervene at that fraying level. But essentially, through my understanding of water physics, the water that surrounds the DNA strand is highly stacked. It's extremely structured, and its molecules are arranged in very tight patterns, very specific tight patterns that maintain the integrity of our DNA. It's actually what causes our DNA to coil the way it does, is that reaction to that water. So that water not only surrounds the DNA, but it also runs through the central column, and it surrounds and protects our telomeres. So as that water begins to unstack, as it begins to lose that tightness of its structure, it is no longer able to provide the integrity for those telomeres, and those telomeres begin to fray faster. So accelerated aging is very highly correlated to cellular dehydration, or what could be considered even like the subclinical dehydration that Nevin has talked about, which most people in America suffer from the subclinical dehydration levels.
Right. And that leads to my next question. How do we know we are properly hydrated? And the second question is, what are the signs of dehydration?
Yeah, that's a great question. So many of the minor everyday ailments that we would take an aspirin for, a headache, aches and pains, tiredness, when we're reaching for coffee,
Right.
really that energy that we're needing is hydration. And headaches and the aches and pains are just as the very first sign of dehydration.
Wow. I
Yeah,
didn't know.
absolutely. I think it's also very safe to say that, for the majority of people who are drinking, tap water or just a well water, bottled water, these are not purified, these are not conditioned. Those people, which is the majority of us, are suffering from a subclinical dehydration. They're simply not able to hydrate themselves properly with that kind of contaminated water. And that water is highly contaminated. So again, why we advocate so much that purification step cannot be dismissed is so critical, because our contamination is very, very high. Our water has hundreds of contaminants from tap to bottled. It literally has hundreds of chemical contaminants that are all carcinogenic in nature, and put a lot of stress on our bodies to detox that. So that in itself can cause a marked dehydration.
Right. Toxins, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are elements that work together in our body's functions to maintain proper hydration. So can you talk to me about these key elements?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to talk about them. Electrolytes, the body maintaining proper levels of electrolytes. So that happens with fresh fruits and vegetables, cranberries, oranges, celery. We need to have those electrolytes. They're a very important in the function of the cell being able to operate properly and to carry water in and out of the cell membrane. And also the other big piece is the EFAs, essential fatty acids. So those are also really crucial in supporting healthy cells.
Right. And the third element would be the amount of water.
And the quality of water.
Oh, yes, right.
A quality
Absolutely.
of water that has the small crystal structures.
Right. So quality intake of electrolytes, intake of the essential fatty acids.
Yes.
So what is the amount of water? We have a hard time. Like I have a hard time. I don't know how much water to drink. And when I drink a lot of water, maybe a little bit less than a gallon, I have to use the bathroom all the time. So that would be really enlightening.
I think, Nevin, I would love to hear your comments on this. I'll just first very briefly say that, again, quality is so much more important than quantity when it comes to water. Our bodies can actually function with much less water than we think it needs if that water is of an extremely high quality. The problem, of course, is that most of us do not have access to a quality water. So we continue to drink simply what we have, hoping that the quantity will make up for the quality. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. So as you see, Valerie, that it oftentimes will just kind of pass right through. Alternatively, it can also cause things like edema and a buildup of water between cells, simply because it's not able to enter and exit the cell effectively. It builds up in the space in between. So quantity is really much less important than quality.
Right. So if we are drinking quality water, what would be the proper amount to be hydrated?
It really depends on the person, their sex, their weight, and their activity, what they're doing on a daily basis.
Right.
So in general, women need more water on a daily basis than men do. But, the traditional quantities, I think for women, it's like 5 liters a day. And for men, it's 4 liters a day. I've been doing a really interesting experiment on myself here lately, and I'm still learning about this, but there's what they refer to as gel water. Have you done any homework on that, Carly?
So oftentimes what's referred to as a gel water is simply a water that has a highly structured nature. But Nevin, maybe you'll expand on what you're talking about specifically.
What I'm talking about specifically, it's almost a bit of a musogenic water. And what I've been doing is I've been soaking flax seeds and fennel seeds in a gallon of water for a couple of days. And it creates a musogenic structure in the water. And I'm finding that I'm feeling more hydrated drinking that water. When I drink that water, it stays with me. I'm not passing it or going to the bathroom nearly as much. It's very interesting. And we'd have to maybe schedule another interview.
I know. I would love that.
Had done a little more homework on that.
Oh, no. There I go with more things to do. I'll change everything now. I've been changing so much.
I would also suggest that the quantity depends not only on those things that Nevin mentioned, but also things like diet and simply what stage they're at. So for example, if I was, sort of the average, still health conscious person, but, drinking just what's available, whether it's a tap water or a bottled water, or maybe I put it through a very simple filter. And then I switch over to a quality water. I may find that for the first few weeks, I need more of that water than I will after, say, a month, because I'll be doing such a strong detox. As soon as I start putting in a quality water to my body begins to start using it. It's like, yes, this is finally what I needed in order to, detox the cells and hydrate myself. And so I might find that my water needs may change after a few weeks or a month or 2 months, depending on my level of toxicity. That after those detox processes have really stabilized, I will probably need less water than I did before. At least that has been my experience and the experience of many people that I know.
Yeah, and I would say also it's also a practice, like sleeping is a practice. So we need consistency in our lives. Our body needs consistency. So we need a solid 8 hours of sleep every night, and we need X amount of liters of water every day. So the more that we can be consistent with our body, the better results and we're going to get in our overall health on a daily basis.
Right. Carly, you mentioned earlier accumulation of water between cells when we are overhydrated. What is the consequence of that?
Well, that's something like edema. So people, it happens very often as we age, that people end up with an edema, which is simply the water between the cells. So we might have swelling in our ankles or in our joints. The consequence of that is that the water is in between our cells rather than in our cells. So our cells are dehydrated, and our body ends up with this buildup of this bulk water, which it cannot properly use. So there's a variety of consequences, mainly being, an ill health, and oftentimes a pain and fatigue.
Oh, so the question actually that I should have asked is, what is edema? I never heard about that.
Yeah, edema is simply the swelling in between the cells. So an accumulation of water in between the cells rather than in the cells themselves. So it happens very much to as we get older. It's not very common in children. But it happens very much to, something most senior citizens are going to be familiar with.
Right. Thank you. Nevin, you mentioned earlier that women need more water than men. Why?
I do not know why. Carly?
Why do women need more water than men?
Yeah.
That's a wonderful question. And I
think you mentioned, right, Nevin? I'm sorry, Carly.
No, please.
Did
go
I
ahead,
understand
Valerie?
that well? Or maybe I'm... Okay.
Yes. Every time I've ever researched the proper amount of water for a person to drink on a daily basis, it's always indicated that women require more than men do. And I don't know exactly why that is. Intuitively, I would think it would have something to do with their hormonal system and their monthly cycles of blood building and passing.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I would expect, and I would need to do a little more digging on that, but I would expect that it has to do with blood volume and simply our cyclical needs that are different than men. It could also have to do with the different balance of various hormones and body fat contents as well. It could even have to do with simply the way that women tend to approach thinking and the world in a slightly different way than men. We are not simply smaller versions of men. we are very different, right? And so our thinking is different, our needs are different. The way we approach problems is often different. And of course, our hormonal cycles, I would assume, would be the major physical factor there for why we need more water to sustain those regular monthly processes.
Right.
One other thing I want to say on that subject is it also depends on what people are doing for themselves dietarily. Okay, so drinking a lot of coffee or drinking a lot of alcohol, then you're going to need to drink more water for sure, because those are things that are going to dehydrate your body.
Right. True. So the main question, what is the best kind of water to drink? The healthiest?
I'd love Nevin to comment on this, but again, first I will just very briefly say that the best water is one that is purified and free of contaminants. And when I say purified, I really mean purified. So 99% of the reverse osmosis systems on the market, or even the very advanced distillation machines, do not create a purified water. So majority of your RO systems or your standard filters, your Brita pitchers, still leave you with quite a high contaminant level. RO systems, most of the time, unless you're really working with like a hospital and laboratory grade reverse osmosis like Nevin uses, most of the systems on the market don't perform in real world conditions, and they reduce their effectiveness very quickly. So you're still getting a high level of contaminant. So first, a purified water. Second, a remineralized water. You've got to put those minerals back in after you've purified it. And then thirdly, a highly structured water, one that has been, processed and conditioned to increase and improve its structure. And I'll let Nevin take it from here.
Wow. Where do we find that water?
Nevin.
Well, my study of water and nature is very primordial in that I look at how water was given to us from Mother Nature, looking at how the earth existed before man started tinkering with her and destroying her. So from my study of Victor Schauberger, we identify all the different types of natural occurring water on earth. We have rainwater, we have lake water, we have river water, we have ocean water. Then we have the springs, and there's really two types of springs. There's seepage springs and true springs. And the difference between a true spring and a seepage spring is that a seepage spring only goes to a certain depth in the earth. It hits a rocky layer and then comes back to the earth's surface. Whereas a true spring travels deep, deep into the earth. It comes into contact with the hot, molten layers of the earth where it's completely purified. Deep, deep inside the earth, it's reborn, basically. It's what Schauberger would refer to as a juvenile water. And then it makes a journey back to the surface of the earth. And that's when the water is ripened, it's matured by going through all the different crystals and minerals and stones inside the earth. So, we're looking at water much like the food that we eat. You wouldn't pick an apple or an orange off a tree that wasn't mature and ripe and think that it was going to nourish you. It's the same with the water we drink on a daily basis. It needs to be a mature, ripe water that's filled with all the nutrients and energy that we need to nourish our body on all levels.
Absolutely. Oh, man. There's a lot of advertisement marketing behind alkaline water. What is the difference between alkaline water and spring water?
It's very different. It's the process. It's a process. The alkaline water, 99% of the alkaline waters that you buy in the store or the systems that are purchased for home use utilize an electrolysis process to split the water molecule apart. And from my study of water and all the research I've done, and intuitively, this is a very unnatural process and a man-made manipulation of water, which is very unnatural. So, Carly?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. Not only is it unnatural, but it's also unhealthy. So when we talk about the difference between marketed alkaline water and, say, a natural spring water, which is naturally alkaline, these are two completely different entities, completely different substances. As David mentioned, that marketing process is usually done with electrolysis, or I've seen many bottled waters that simply have, added baking soda that they use to increase the alkalinity. But what you end up doing then is you're ingesting a water that has either been artificially or through the addition of something like sodium bicarbonate made highly alkaline, and that's simply not good for our body. It taxes our GI system. We have many redundant systems in place in our body to maintain our body's pH needs. Our body has a variety of pH needs depending on different locations in the body, and for the most part, our body requires a certain level of acidity in order to reduce bacterial growth and prevent infections. So when we ingest something that is artificially highly alkaline in nature, we're really taxing our body to try to combat that and to try to bring our pH levels back to a level that our body can use to function properly. When you have something like a natural spring water that is naturally alkaline, it's naturally alkaline because of the natural processes it's been through and the natural minerals that it's picked up along the way, which is not going to be a simple splash of baking soda. It's typically a broad spectrum of calcium and magnesium and different alkaline minerals. So those are completely different substances. It's akin to comparing apples and oranges, except, those apples are poisoned. So those are the difference there. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, alkaline water is very dangerous.
I had no idea that was the water that I was consuming, alkaline water, for the last year.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Most people just simply aren't aware that the tax they're putting on their body. But again, your stomach requires a very specific pH level, around 4, in order to digest food properly, in order to reduce bacterial growth. So, drinking a highly alkaline water taxes the body tremendously. Our body is forced to create a lot of hydrochloric acid to dump into the stomach to bring the pH back down to where it needs to be. As a result, it kicks a lot of bicarbonate into the bloodstream, and that system just gets heavily taxed.
I do feel the difference. I'm going to thank on record Nevin again for suggesting the spring water that I drink now. I feel better, energy, I sleep better. I was really surprised that the alkaline water was not as healthy as I thought, or not healthy at all for what I hear you're saying.
It's just very counterproductive. I'm sorry, Nevin, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the whole marketing and hype and craze behind alkaline water started quite a while ago. I actually was first introduced to that technology 23 years ago. And these machines, they were developed in hospitals in Asia for people that had cancer or were severely obese, for people with really severe health conditions. And the technology was developed as a therapeutic healing device. It was never, ever, ever intended for the average healthy person as their daily drinking water. It was just really, capitalism and marketing that put a spin on it and really fed people a lot of misinformation about this type of technology and this unnatural manipulation of water to be used as their daily drinking water. It was never intended that way. And it's sad, but a lot of people have been very misinformed. And there's a really good YouTube video that we can share with your listeners that goes into more of the medical science behind it and what's happening inside our body, like Carly was saying, with our digestion, and how the body actually has many different pHs throughout the body. Our skin is a different pH. Parts of our digestion are different pHs. And just the whole idea that our daily drinking water is going to influence the pH of our body is really a misnomer. It's our diet. It's what we're eating on a daily basis that influences the body's pH. So, lots of coffee, soda pop, a heavy red meat diet, those are all going to really acidify one's body.
Right. And that high alkaline water, Nevin, you really said it so well. And I just wanted to reiterate, I mentioned that it was dangerous, but it's as it is used as a daily drinking water, like Nevin mentioned, that danger really comes into play, and it comes into play over long-term use of daily drinking. So for marketers, they're not so concerned because it will take time for those people to start having those consequences, but it eventually can cause not just problems with our gastrointestinal system, but also lead to things like kidney problems or recurring UTIs as the urinary tract system just becomes too alkaline in nature, and we end up with bacterial growth there as well. So that's when it can really start to have that long-term damage as a daily drinking water.
Right. That pissed me off.
Yeah, that makes me very angry.
Right have to piss me off.
Yeah.
But
one of the
cool.
things that nobody's really talking about either is the fact that for the home use, the machines that people have at home, they don't have proper purification in front of the electrolysis process. So, what really gets me concerned is that, you've got contaminated water coming into contact with an electrolysis process. Are those contaminants becoming more volatile? Who knows? Nobody's talking about that, and no scientific research has been done on that. So, yeah, it's kind of a scary thing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's all about awareness. This conversation will help.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Carly, do you want to say something?
No, go ahead, Valerie. You're absolutely right. It's just an education at that point, right? So there's a lot of misinformation that's promoted by a lot of marketers, and it's just about educating people so that we can make better choices.
Right. Like in my case, I'm always reading, and I thought I knew enough about, health, and I didn't. I was drinking alkaline water, and it was not the best for my health.
Right.
So moving the conversation to a more spiritual realm, my next question is, how do consciousness and memory relate to water?
Oh, that's one of my favorite questions. So, I touched on it briefly earlier, just about the structure of water. So my book, Water Codes, is fully about just that topic wholeheartedly, just about structured water, what it means that water has structure, and then what the implications are for consciousness and memory. Structured water is really a liquid crystal. So when we look at crystals, we see that they have an arrangement, how their molecules are organized. Determines what those crystals do. So, for example, the molecule arrangement of ruby helps cohere light. So it was used for the original lasers, were made out of ruby, because light comes in, the way those molecules are arranged puts all that light together and shoots it out like a laser. The way that the carbon atoms are arranged in graphite, they're arranged in sheets, which makes it very soft and easy to break and perfect for things like pencils. But if you look at diamonds, that same carbon is arranged in these very tight interlocking patterns, which is what makes it the strongest substance on Earth. We also use crystals for things like hard drives. We have our solid state drive systems. We have crystals that are able to store massive amounts of information and holograms even. All of those things are possible because of the arrangement of those molecules. Having the molecules within those crystals organized gives them certain properties. One of those properties is memory and information storage. So what's special about water is that it is more like a liquid crystal. It has those hydrogen and oxygen in structured water. It has those hydrogen and oxygen arranged in repeating and organized patterns. But because it's a liquid and it's responsive, it's fluid and flexible, and it's capable of change. So what ends up happening is all of those patterns and organization provide places for information storage and information conduction. So memory and information can be held and contained in water. Water has a memory, and we see that through many different types of research experiments or photographic research. We can see that visually. that water has a response and that it is able to hold information. So in the body, we can see that really well. We look at things like where memory is stored. And while we have certain centers in the brain that are more used than others for memory storage, we cannot find a place where memory is complete. We cannot find a place where consciousness and say, hey, this is the part of the brain that holds consciousness. We can't do that because the consciousness and memory within ourselves is stored throughout our body, and it's stored throughout our intense network of structured water system. Those 99% of our molecules are holding information and holding memory and allowing our consciousness to work. So I look at water as the mechanism for consciousness. It's what allows consciousness to operate. It's what allows for information storage and also for the responsiveness to our environment and to stimuli and to thought. Those patterns are really found in water, and we've seen this through antiquity. So part of the book, I go through sort of our ancestral relationship with water throughout time. What is it that all of our texts through every religion across the world throughout antiquity, spanning space and time, have all had these same ideas about water in terms of its ability to cleanse things spiritually and its ability to affect and drive our consciousness. And so it's really a very deep realm of thought and space where we can explore sort of how our consciousness and memory works through the physics of structured water science.
Right. I don't want to expand the conversation about your book today because we will have an episode just for that. Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
So, but this is one of the things that caught my attention, the relationship between consciousness and water. So, yeah, Carly, thank you for explaining this to us. And I will definitely have you back. I have a lot of questions for you on that, about your book, Water Codes.
Thank you. I'd love to.
Her book deserves an entire show to itself.
Thank you, Nevin.
Yes. So leading to our last questions, they are meant to be quick answers, but you can just talk it away. What is your definition of spirituality? First question. And then in what ways do you practice spirituality in your daily life?
That is a beautiful question. How would I define spirituality? I think there's many facets to spirituality. I would suggest that at its core, it's how we relate to ourselves and to our world and the purpose of our life. I think is very deeply connected to our own sense of spirituality and what that means.
The following question attached to that, it's how do you practice that understanding of spirituality in your life?
Right. So spirituality for myself isn't so much a practice as it is a way of life. There are things that I do as a practice within my daily life or my physical self-care, things like meditation or hiking, spending time in nature, yoga, connection with loved ones, service, being in service to others. Those are all things that I do to practice spirituality, but I think as a whole, it's a way of approaching life and a way of living life where it's with gratitude and it's with sort of an awe-ness of nature and the awesome nature of life. And I think approaching the world in that way and making it a way of life rather than something that I practice and, a practice for me is something you do for a short period of time and then you're done and you wait until you come back and do it again. And spirituality is right. So,
that is true. Right. I like that, Carly. I really do. Like spirituality should be a way of life. Mm-hmm. But I also believe that some components of spirituality need to be practiced, like gratitude.
Absolutely.
It is a practice. We got to practice it. I have to practice every day. I know it's becoming more part of me, but I remind myself.
Right. And that's how those practices become a way of life and a way of being, right? Is through that kind of constant reminder. When we begin to fall out, we bring ourselves back. Just like in meditation, when we begin to wander, our mind begins to wander, we just bring it back. We don't get upset at ourselves or think that we are, have failed or we're not. No, that's not the way it is. It's simply when we begin to wander, we come back.
Yeah. Right. Because it's part of life too, right?
Absolutely.
To wonder a bit too much. Or depends, women, we have that time of the month that's kind of hard. And then we have to remind ourselves of certain things.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Nevin, what is your definition of spirituality and how do you practice it or how do you live it?
Yeah, definitely. I am right there with Carly and everything that she mentioned. My path has become one of love. So the root of my personal spirituality is love. And I have a motto. It's to be love, give love, and to live love. So that's really become my spiritual path, is the path of love. Loving acceptance, recognizing that there is benevolent, divine, angelic forces that ultimately prevail throughout the universe, and seeing the bigger picture, and trusting that, yes, there is a benevolent, loving force that is working out its grand plan in a beautiful way. Yeah.
Right. So you said love. What is love to you?
It's a lot of things. It's appreciation. It's gratitude. It's humility. Love's the basis of so many other attributes. Truth comes from love. It's a humility, definitely. And and as Carly said, an awe for life and the gift of life and this life that we're experiencing here on earth. Just, the humble gratitude for each and every day and each and every moment. Yeah.
Yeah. When you say being humble, is it connected to acceptance?
Certainly. Yes.
Yeah. That's such a powerful healing inner resource, right? Acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance and perspective, and the gratitude for, here in the Western world, most of us are just, so blessed with so much abundance and so many comforts, and just thinking about where you are compared to millions of other people in the same moment of time. I was listening to some radio program the other day, and there was the largest refugee camp in the world is like 750,000 people living in a camp.
Wow.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, it was just really difficult for me to put my head around that so many people living in such dire, basic circumstances. And so I try to keep my perspective in check.
What is another word for healing?
Another word for healing. Nevin, do you have a thought on that?
I do. I don't know if there's necessarily a word isn't coming up. It's more of a concept of vitality. or, it's really more, instead of having to be healed or be engaged in a healing process, another word would be vitality, and being engaged in the action of living our greatest vitality and our greatest potential of health.
Me too.
I like that. Yeah,
I would echo that. Wholeheartedly.
Yeah. What makes you laugh?
Oh.
Oh, you're laughing already. So you're thinking about something.
There are so many things that make me laugh. But one of them certainly is just a joyful approach and connection with life around me, whether that's connection with others or connection with nature, connection with animals. My pets make me laugh. My friends and family make me laugh. I make myself laugh on a very regular basis. It is an expression of joy.
Right. Silence.
I'm here. Yeah, laughing at myself is the healthiest thing I can do multiple times a day.
Agreed.
I agree. It is great, right, to be silly when we are alone.
It is. And laughter is such a wonderful thing for our body too. Our health really responds, our immune system responds so well to laughter. It's just such a joyful experience for us from the time we're infants. We love to laugh.
Laughter is food.
Mm-hmm.
Food? I never thought it that way.
It does feed the soul, doesn't it?
Could be, yeah. What is the purpose of life?
Ooh.
I think it's different for everybody.
I agree. Yeah, I know. I think the purpose for my life is to learn and practice and grow my understanding and sense of gratitude and awe and awareness at this incredible planet and this incredible life that we're given, the magic of consciousness, the experience of living in these complex forms of our body, and the sense of what it means for our spirit to be so large, and yet still be able to contain ourselves within this physical form.
Oh, goodness. My purpose in life. It's really to be a voice and a carrier of wisdoms and knowledges that would have otherwise been lost, I feel. There's just pools of information, ancient wisdoms that are becoming scarce or going extinct, and really preserving and passing on a lot of very important ancient wisdom that would go into obscurity otherwise.
Mm-hmm. I think also the idea of lifting others as we climb is something that fits very well into what Nevin just said. And I do carry that very, very dear to my heart as my way of approaching my life and being able to help others around me.
Yeah. What are you not afraid of that most people are?
I think there's many people that are afraid of failure. And I look at it differently. I think that failure only comes when we don't try. I think trying and not succeeding at something is different than failing. I think most people look at it in a different way, where they think if they're not going to succeed at something, then they're going to fail, and then they're afraid to try new things because they don't want to fail. Trying something new is never failing. It's trying something new. So,
courage. Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah.
I'm not afraid of being unique.
Amen.
You know, and
Not afraid of being you.
Yeah.
And
to just be myself.
really
And
unique.
what Carly said, that goes for me as well. I'm not afraid of failing, and I'm not afraid of being successful either.
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
some people are, right? Okay. And that leads to my other question, one of the final questions. What is your definition of success?
Sharing. I think just being able to share with others and be a voice. If you're getting your message out there, then you're being successful.
I agree. Again, lifting others as you climb, I think is successful. I think that is success.
Yeah, helping others definitely is success. You know, being a part of helping make the world a better place in your own little special way, that's success.
Right. If you were to have one meal every day for the rest of your life, what would that be?
One meal for the rest of my life? Quality water and fresh fruits and vegetables. That would be.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it would be quality water and some sort of fresh fruit and vegetable.
Yeah. Some people are breatharians or vegetarians. I consider myself a waterarian. You know, I could just live off of my special water, and that's all I would need. But, a salad harvested from my garden every day would be nice too.
Salad, right? If you had to choose one exercise to do for the rest of your life, what would that be?
A physical exercise?
Yes. Yoga.
Pilates.
Pilates. Okay. What does it mean to be yourself? Or to know yourself?
Yeah, that is a deep question. And it took me many years to really know myself. And it took going to very deep parts of myself that might have been a little uncomfortable, and still being willing to look at that with love. So knowing myself is to love myself and to be authentic to who I am and what I need, what I need to share, and what I need in order to be in a place where I can share.
Right. Nevin?
Oh, definitely the loving thyself is the foundation of it all. Yeah, I think it starts there. Ask the question one more time, Valerie.
Yes. What is to know yourself?
To know yourself. You know, the other thing that I'll say to that, you know, besides loving yourself is that's a kind of an open-ended process.
Right.
So true.
I think it continues. It's ongoing, and it's the realization that knowing yourself it's constantly. It's a constant
renewal of knowledge.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Well, and
we can never really know everything.
Right. We're such dynamic creatures too. You know, who I am today may be different than who I am tomorrow, or who I am next week, or who I am next year. Right. So we're being open to that change and allowing ourselves to grow and loving ourselves through that process, I think, is very important.
Yeah. And that's life.
That's life, yes.
Constantly renewal. It never stops. Constantly changing. Do you believe in life after death?
Yes.
Yes, most certainly.
What kind of life?
Ooh. different than the one we experience in our physical form. The idea that our spiritual self continues long after our physical self is done is one that is so pervasive across virtually every culture throughout time. I think it's hard to deny it.
Yeah. I don't think we die. We don't die. We continue in another dimension and in other forms of energy and physicality.
Right. What are 3 things about life you know for sure?
I know that gratitude and thankfulness and a loving heart is a transformative power. That I know for sure.
Yeah. Loving life, being love, giving love, and living love.
Yeah, I like that. Lots of love. Yeah. Yes, yes, and yes. Thank you so much for this meaningful, spiritual, fun, healthy conversation. It's really great. Thank you
for having us.
Thanks for having us, Valerie. I appreciate you providing such a space for these conversations to happen.
Yeah, thank you for being part of it. I wouldn't be doing this without you. Where can we find more information about you, your company, your products, books, projects?
You can find out more about me through my website, which is watercodes.com. That's a plural, watercodes. Or you can email me directly, carly@watercodes.com. I am happy to take questions and provide feedback and engage in fruitful discussions.
You can find me on my website, www.truest, TRUEST, spring.com, or you can email me, nevin@truestspring.com.
Great. Thank you so much again. Bye for now.
Thank you, Valerie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Dr. Colleen Uday, please visit her website, watercodes.com. To learn more about Nevin Eckert, please visit his website, truespring.com. To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.